My. Hello, Brigade! And hello, all of you very special guests. Oh, what a beautiful day this is. I want to start by saying thank you to Marine Corps Colonel and Dr. Kenneth Dunn, and to my mighty class of 1970. I enjoy this tremendous honor today because of Dr. Dunn's and my class's stubbornness. This was not our first charge up the hill, nor our second, nor our third. It took a fourth magic run. This time, we made it to the top of the hill. So this is just one tremendous day, and it's that way because they just wouldn't give up. So thank you. Thanks also to my family and my friends and my classmates for always being there for me. Thanks to everyone who's ever tried to help me. I stand on your shoulders. Thanks to my wise and wonderful wife, Vicki, who's right there. Who makes me feel every day that I'm the luckiest man in the world. Not very long ago, one of my hugely successful 1970 classmates and I were talking about what it was that we had that allowed us to enjoy the opportunities and the successes that we enjoyed. We said that maybe it was pixie dust that had been sprinkled on us maybe at birth. But as I thought more deeply, that little light came on, that light that we often have known ourselves. I'm a left-handed black man who grew up in the segregated Jim Crow South in the 1950s and 60s. Nothing was easy. Some of you can empathize with that, others can sympathize with it. No, for me, it wasn't pixie dust, it was Dixie dust. That's Dixie with a capital D. And at that time, it was sprinkled liberally at birth in Norfolk, Virginia, and all throughout the South, and much of the North and Midwest and West, on everyone whose birth certificate identified them as quote unquote Negro. That Dixie dust had mystical powers. Sometimes it would make those of us who had been sprinkled with it, it would make us seem invisible. When one of my best friends, Edwin Shirley, and I became interested in the Naval Academy, it seemed that we were invisible because the men who gave out the nominations in Virginia and across the American South didn't want to see folks who looked like me have the privilege of matriculating in these hallowed halls. But we had the will, and our community found a way. But then sometimes that Dixie dust made me feel superhuman, like a character straight out of the Marvel comics. There was the evening when Theophilus Gibson and I were stopped by a couple of policemen on the way home from a yard party. These were white policemen. They jumped out of the car and they shouted for us to halt. "Put your hands up," they said. Theophilus asked why they were stopping us. And one of the policemen said, "Two big 6'2", 6'3" guys just robbed a convenience store not so far from here. He said, "But sir, we are each 5'6" tall, and we each weigh 130 pounds. The policeman stepped back and he said, "You know, in the dark, all you black boys look alike." At that point, he paused for just a moment. He said, "Now, you boys get your butts on home and stay out of trouble, do you hear?" So, there's no doubt that it wasn't pixie dust, it was Dixie dust that got sprinkled on me in those early days in Norfolk. I did get sprinkled, though, with some of that pixie dust, and I think it happened right here at the Naval Academy. This pixie dust was loaded with priceless ingredients like integrity, discipline, respect, humility, diplomacy, and leadership. Yes, indeed, the pixie dust here at Navy was some powerful stuff. When I started here in 1966, the Brigade of Midshipmen was about 4,000 strong, not that much different than it is today. Unlike today, though, there were only 20 mids who looked like me at that time, 8 in the 3 classes ahead of me, and 12 in my class of 1970. And there were no women. Diversity really didn't exist here. In my 4 years at the boat school, except for swimming sub-squad, and some of you can identify with that, I was the only one who looked like me in any of my classes. But that stark environment worked out okay, because every day of every year for 4 years, I was learning to not only survive, but to thrive in a world that was not at all like the world that I grew up in. Every year, my fellow black midshipmen and I grew more confident in our ability to fully compete and be really good, competent young officers. Here at Navy, we really learned the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we learned it in ways that most of the brigade did not and could not. Fact is, most of the brigade who didn't look like me were living and learning in a very homogenized world where everyone looked alike and where most shared a common culture. But the Navy and the Marine Corps that we would serve and be young officers in was anything but homogenized. It goes without saying that most of my classmates and almost all of the brigade at the time were outstanding Americans, absolutely outstanding Americans. But you know, I think I might have had just a little edge when I graduated and went into the world. That edge was because of my nearly unique diversity, equity, and inclusion experience here at Navy. What the Academy taught me and my fellow black midshipmen was how to lead diverse teams. And most of the brigade had to learn that on the fly. That on-the-job diversity, equity, and inclusion training sometimes presented painful challenges with regard to fairness and excellence. It did so because if you were not regularly interacting with folks who don't look like you, then you perhaps are not able to make the best of the relationships that you're dealing with. When I was in 1st Battalion, 11th Marines at Camp Pendleton, I'd often talk with the enlisted Marines. And for those of color, I would too often hear that they did have concerns about whether they would be fairly evaluated. And at the time, I promised I would do everything I could to make sure that that was the case. So for the brigade, here's what I ask you. While you're here at Navy, actively seek the company of midshipmen who don't look like you, or think like you, or act like you. That's a hard ask, but a crucial one. Learn to respect, to be comfortable with, and to appreciate what folks who are different than you bring to the table. Marvin Gaye would have said it like this: talk to me so you can see what's going on. Yeah, what's going on. One other thing. All of you will enjoy a reasonable level of success in the future, and you'll be presented with surprising opportunities. Seize those opportunities and use them to help build a better world. I am empathetic by nature, sometimes to a fault. I have a soft spot for underserved and underappreciated communities. Me being asked to serve as Medifast Take Shape for Life CEO and chairman, and on the boards of Marine Corps Toys for Tots, Navy Mutual Aid, the Reginald Lewis Museum, Simple Generosity, and the Medal of Honor Leadership and Education Center were all wonderful and gratifying surprises for me. Add to that the Naval Academy Foundation and our Alumni Association, and you see in me a life fully fulfilled. My charge to you is, find something really worth caring about and do what you can do to make a difference for it. Be sure to have the Alumni Association on your list. With that, I'm done.